Okay, we're back with some real talk about the biology of Kundalini with Jana Dixon, exploring the fire of life. We are in part 2 of symptomology and sense of self. Okay, so during periods of accelerated spiritual growth, when there is a rapid shift in the sense of self, the main adjustments we need to make are adaptation to, and then she lists, loss of a rigid sense of the known, loss of the sense of sure identity, the sense of infinity, space, groundlessness, and emptiness. So even just pausing with those symptoms, first of all, going from like a feelingly stable environment to suddenly losing a rigid sense of the known, that means like you're constantly questioning if stuff is real or not. And that's actually part of the experience. Losing sense of a sure sense of identity. Identity is everything about like who I'm supposed to be in society, in my family, in the world. What's my role? Am I an employer? Am I a partner? Am I a child? Am I a mother? Am I a father? Like that's identity. And that gets really foggy when the larger self is coming in, because there's a greater truth that's being revealed than even the smaller reality has been showing us. Even though those things are important, of course they are. Of course your children and family are important. I'm definitely not saying they are, or the rules of a particular place, but I'm saying at a specific level of awakening, and she is, your sense of self goes beyond for a moment those boundaries in order to like take in more of reality, and therefore your grip on that stuff and ability to manage it is lessened during this time. Loss of routine habits, amplification of sensory acuity. Okay, so you're hearing or smelling things stronger. Magnification or loss of appetite. So you're wanting to eat all the time or really not. Increased psychic and subtle abilities, that can be a huge range of abilities. Greater range and depth of emotion and feeling. So you can be like really high one moment or seem really mad because the depth at which you're experiencing your feelings now is heightened, okay? Change in one's sense of energy and embodiment. Okay, the sense of energy and embodiment. You're just feeling yourself different. Distortions in the sense of time. That can also mean hours feel like minutes, or they feel like years, like there's a distortion in the sense of time. Kundalini threatens the safety functioned conditioned self because there's no place to hide from truth, for the brightening eye of God is within us. Truth is healing, and healing is truth. Depending on how well we can let go of the past and be restructured in the moment through cellular forgiveness down to the cells, this determines our ability to substantiate spiritual growth. However, the irony is that supersensory ability withstanding, one has to become meta adapted to a spiritually corrupt world. This is a challenge, okay? You're super sensitive and you still are in face of this really corrupt system and world, and you have to adapt with your heightened sense to this. So at first, that's challenging. To not react negatively to negativity, or in other words, to fear no evil. That is a challenge. So if we listen very carefully, Kundalini does teach us how to do this, but we have to be willing to experience earth-shattering bliss and the full implications of our higher purpose and place in the world. We must be willing to fully feel the call to spiritual action. So it does take a soul surrender, even like to be willing to feel all that stuff. Unfortunately, Kundalini has been associated with symbols such as the serpent, so non-awakeners might relegate it to a more physical domain, but one is never so close to spirit than during a Kundalini awakening. Kundalini is an amplification of spirit in the flesh. This is one of the reasons why post-awakening life seems so lackluster, for the tide of spirit has nearly returned to the socially conditioned acceptable level, and the individual still feels the echo of the calling to a sense of humanity that is beyond our wildest dreams, but is nowhere to put this in our consensus fallen world. So she's saying you have the awakening, you see it all different, you feel it, and then that Kundalini recedes and you still can feel it where it should be. And you're dropped back into this sort of regular feeling state, and that can be a big bummer. On feeling the depths of one's fear and helplessness, there is less need to prevent these in others. One realizes it's all good and it's okay. And that's why I started coaching, because after going through that big thing, then I realized, you know what, it's all okay. All of it is okay. Once you feel that helplessness and you surrender to it, and you actually find out you're still going to be okay on the other side of it, then you realize that's okay. To the degree that we get rid of the parasite of the defense system, the safety addicted conditioned self. Now there's a difference between safety addicted and addicted, but they're both addictions. A drug addiction and a safety addiction are both addictions. To the degree we get rid of the parasite of the defense system that we created from day zero, this is the degree to which we can access our higher self. So our defense system has to come down, because we have to embrace the totality. And of course it was there as a protection back way when, but there's very little that we actually need to protect ourselves from now. We can manage the full force of God in these bodies. Kundalini is involuntary parasite killing. It means you didn't choose it, but it does do it, for it dissolves our pupil defense strategy, yet it doesn't automatically mean that we suddenly have the skills to deal with our world in a higher fashion. We essentially have to grow through deeper insight. So you have to go through the stuff. Like, you might see it and know it, but you don't really know how to deal with it yet. To not be identified with our egoity is not about existing in some impersonal state, bereft of idiosyncrasy and individuality, but rather is about being present both as our unique somebodyness and as self-transcending being. Even at the same time, the point is not to negate or minimize our selfhood, which is less a noun than a verb, but to permit it in such rich transparency relative to our fundamental nature that it cannot help but colorfully and fittingly represent us, how superficially. However, when we let I do the driving, we usually end up wandering like hungry ghosts through the I gotta be me malls of distorted or overfed desire, shopping until we're broke, satiated or diverted elsewhere. Even so, it's crucial to not prematurely cease such wanderings. It's so easy, as when we are in the spineless throes of spiritual correctness, to make an ideal out of being good or spiritual, and a villain or scapegoat out of our darker impulses. To transcend yourself, be yourself. Robert Augustus Masters from The Darkness Shining Wild. So to transcend yourself, be yourself. I mean, he's really just talking about, like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff you have to go through that should be gone through, even if, you know, it's like being caught up in the world. That's not to say you should stop being caught up in the world until you have had your fill. And some people have their fill before other people. You know, you have to be willing to be transparently who you are, and sometimes that's just forced upon us through this rising energy. We can endure anything if there is a goal and a reason. This belief in a larger purpose is the most important factor in keeping people together under crisis. Like, what is their goal? What is their reason? What are they doing this for? That's the piece that holds a person together, and that holds the people together that are supporting this person. In the dissolution of the ego, bliss too is sensed as a kind of hell. Kundalini awakenings are the burning away of the pain body and the creation of a new template. What we do with that template constitutes our spiritual attainment or not. With Kundalini, we get a second birth, a second chance. But without skillful means, we could very well just create another pain body to replace the old. So it's not guaranteed just because you have a spiritual awakening that you're going to go ahead and grow and evolve. If you don't have the know-how or the skills or someone telling you what's going on, you can just recreate and recycle the old. And that's that karmic loop of reincarnation where you're just creating the same experience in lifetime over and over, and you're passing it generationally and so forth because you don't know any different. During the flux of Kundalini, the presence or witness rises up, and the little ego would like to pop in and give running commentary, explanations, and inane musings. And we notice the drop in energy as we put on the conditioned self's cloak for a sentence or two, just to see if our old self is still there. And we feel the loss of the beloved that we are when we stoop down that way. We can't get rid of thought. Getting rid of thought is not what is called for. It's becoming an observer of one's thought, master of one's thought, pointing one's thought in a larger direction than self-defense and ego survival. That is really the key to spiritual attainment. So to continue to point the mind away from just defensiveness and survival instincts, that's where most of humanity hangs out. And so the masterful mind is going beyond that, going beyond just the survival and beyond the defensiveness and saying, okay, this quote unquote bad thing might be happening, or this crazy thing might be happening, or this complete destruction of reality is happening and everyone's hurt and bad things are happening. But the master says, what is the larger direction? What can be the result of this? What is the long-term goal of this situation? What is it calling all of us toward in ourself and together? The spiritual gains of equanimity, detachment, and disidentification resulting from Kundalini awakening comes about through years of being strung all over the emotional map, having one's archetypal images and psychic materials blown up billboard size and in one's face. So true. By having our interior so radically heightened and exposed, and having to live intimately with our projections, obsessions, and demons, after about 3 years of this, when the chemistry starts backing off, the suspicious, mythic, grasping body-mind is so clearly transparent to us. So, I mean, I do believe if that someone is going through this in your family, the best thing to do is to come around them and support the energy and allow and willingly allow yourself to be the space holder that you know this is going to trigger your own awakening too. And because they're going through it first, it will be softer for the other people in the family. And it can be hard if you're the one going through it and no one's understanding. And that's why I'm doing these videos too, because to recognize that all of their behaviors and reactions, that's also part of their awakening. Like, you can do awakening from far away. A lot of my family's waking up came from my experiences pushing them through their own breakdowns, breakthroughs, but from far away usually, not right in their sphere. And I had to learn some tough lessons and go through some things that maybe didn't seem great, losing everything a lot, being down to zero a lot, and like that having to make me consider again what's truly important and what my goals and intentions truly are. So that's the power of Kundalini, to do that to you. Repetitive or overwhelming circumstances and conditions create cumulative resonance that increases in magnitude until the entire organism is in sympathetic resonance and the barriers to unity are penetrated, so to speak. So the organism's creating the awakening until it takes over the whole vibration, but first it's just like breaking stuff up, right? The increased charge and particular frequency of neural firing opens up unique neural thresholds in crucial parts of the brain. As the contagion of Kundalini builds, it pulls all body-mind systems into its service. sympathetic resonance of oscillating systems is something that occurs in the higher states. The EMF of the heart must pull the other organs into phase lock. The electromagnetic frequency of the heart pulls everything into lock, right? Phase lock is definitely a necessity for the massive chemistry of the inner conjunction, and this is subjectively felt as an uncommon absolute unity. You know, that's just the unity of our body. The unified sense of self is quite alien to our usual divided self. Thus, the highly amplified sexual chemistry fuels the awakening, creating an anabolic energy-building condition that brings things to a crescendo and propels all kinds of alchemical events and radical far-out states and experiences, including increased PSI and time anomalies. True. All this push does bring a lot of different things that you don't think are possible in. All this leads to its opposite in a catabolic breakdown, also depression. Die-off of tissue and restructuring of the body-brain is all happening. Fortunately for us, the whole thing is governed by massive endorphins, which makes the highs and lows of the second birth endurable and creates a cellular equanimity if we're not in resistance. So we're going to do the rest of this page and the next page on depersonalization of Kundalini. So the depersonalization effect of Kundalini is interesting and is one of the hardest things to adjust to. I would concur. Try to use this loss of self-centrism to your advantage by noticing that you have different and deeper capacities within this new vast gentle consciousness. Don't fight in an effort to maintain your old self. This is two people going through the awakening. Just fall deeper into space mind and follow its dictates. Drawing information from your dream life, feeling into your extrasensory abilities, obeying your body's rhythms, and basically using this new you to full effect. Don't think that this depersonalization is wrong, so much as a different realm of experience beyond the known. The old you was the pupae, but this new you is the butterfly. So now you need to learn how to fly rather than crawl. To proactively adjust to the space mind, you have to let go of the need to control. This is the hard one, even for people going through it, the need to control, while becoming increasingly more mindful and focused toward inspired action, thereby falling in sync with Kairos, or God's time. As we metamorphosize, we must embody changes in our sense of time priorities. Time, she says, comma, priorities, social sensitivity, and meaning. So change in our sense of time priorities, social sensitivity, and meaning. Thus, we require a different skill base, different metaphors, different ideas, and different goals. We can start by expanding different metaphors, ideas, and different goals. We can expand our language to describe our lived experience, perhaps leaning toward visionaries and poets for inspiration and stability in this unprecedented state of formlessness. Remember, the butterfly you is vastly more sensitive and wise, and its needs must be respected. For consequences become immediately apparent in that new you. So your relationship to yourself must become more responsive to the new needs belonging to this transformed person you have become. Don't get depressed just because everything has permanently changed. Instead, find out the best way to live within the enigmatic experiences of this spacious self. And more alive you will become as the butterfly. After a catastrophic awakening, we are often faced with the challenge of depersonalization and anhedonia. Your sense of aliveness will return when you build up your nerve sheaths with non-GM lecithin, B-complex, nutritional yeast, fish oils, silicon, and increase the raw greens in your diet. Cut back on cooked carbs, all sugars. Instead, try to eat your carbohydrates in sprouted form or fruit, and this will reduce the spaced out feeling. Do grounding techniques in the Kundalini skills list, which is later in the book, and the inner contact practices in the inner arts. You may need to find a Tai Chi or martial arts teacher to help you focus on energy circulation and breathing. Okay. And finally, changes in self-orientation, and then we'll end this video. Dissolution, mental confusion, difficulty concentrating. So this is the change in your self-orientation. Old anchors and safety nets no longer hold. Free fall in surreal limbo. Deorientation in sense of self. Sense of fading or not really being here. Loss of coordination and motor control during the shock and inner conjunctions. Loss of effective memory. A flattening of memory. Loss of egoic self-continuity and focus. Preoccupation with symbols, archetypes, and myths. Panic in those with no meditation experience who feel they need to control rather than surrender. Emotional outbursts, rapid mood swings, unprovoked episodes of grief, fear, rage, or depression, all within a background of bliss. Desire for quiet, meditation, baths, and solitude. The symptoms and experiences of Kundalini are also so preoccupying as to make all else disappear in one's perception. Leading up and during to the peak, there is a sense of one's life coming to a nexus, a convergence of dream and daily experience by breaking through the walls of one's conscious I to experience more of the sub and superconscious levels as well. So then the substantiation part, there's a dissolution part, and then the substantiation, which she describes as eventual loss of cyclical reactive mental patterns that dissolve along with body armor. So you're starting to break those old patterns. That is, the mind becomes more silent. The body holds less tension and is calm and relaxed. Loss of compulsive and self-destructive habits happens. After the blocks are cleared and the structures change to convey more prana flow, there is a permanent equanimity of the transcendental state. Less ambivalence, distinct from decisions or distance from decisions, more centered, more single-minded of purpose, clearer, deeper perception of reality, distance from symbols, myths, stories, and superstition, increased ability to embrace paradoxes, opposites, marriage of the concrete with the abstract, ability to unify focal and peripheral perception, that is, merging of left and right brain consciousness, which integrates the body, mind, spirit, increased fullness, integration and wholeness, increased autonomy and uniqueness, and lack of a desire to fit in, sensation of seeing with an inner eye, more spontaneity, openness, and non-attachment to experience, increased gratitude and appreciation, increased detachment, objectivity, and transcendence, increased empathy, diplomacy, and sensitivity, yet less sentimentality, impervious to enculturalization, manipulation, or coercion, establishment of true moral intuition rather than mere obedience to law, ability to love, improved relationships, oneness with the world, detachment, objective witnessing, separation from thought and emotion, loss of hunger sense due to pervasive endorphins, and perhaps due to more gluconeogenesis. So as you can see, moving from the dissolution phase into the substantiation, a lot of things dissolve and are kind of crazy and chaotic, and then they come together, but there's more like autonomy and there's more like awareness, and there is a new way of being. It's just not as chaotic. It's more like a controlled, I don't care kind of thing. So we're gonna stop there for today so we keep this video shorter. Again, you can read it online at lulu.com. Jana Dixon's Biology of Kundalini. If you want to go over any of this stuff in person or in a one-on-one, I do work with people during their spiritual awakenings and their family. It can be a really hard time for everyone to understand, so that's what I do. Yeah, so you can send me an email, stageofbliss@gmail.com, or we'll just catch you next time in the next reading. Okay, bye-bye.